Rarely has one year been so hyper-focused on a Star Wars character, but in 2022 with book releases, comic releases, and of course his own show on Disney+, Obi-Wan Kenobi has undergone something of a renaissance. And so with all of this material combined with everything we've seen before, we've really gotten a look at most periods of his life. His time as a Jedi Knight, his ascension to the Jedi Council, his time in the Clone Wars, and of course his tragic duel with his former Padawan. Through all of this, Obi-Wan demonstrates everything that a Jedi Master should be. But of course that wasn't always the case. Kiersten White's Padawan sheds light on a relatively unexplored time in Obi-Wan's life as, you guessed it, a Padawan as he travels to an unknown world to take on a solo adventure. White portrays Obi-Wan as a somewhat brash teenager as he's thrust into an unexpected role of leadership among a completely new people and environment. He trips and stumbles along the way, but ultimately we get to see the shaping of a Padawan who goes on to become one of the greatest Jedi the Order has ever known. Hi everyone, I'm Nathan Emery, content creator here at Youtini, and I'll be your guide to Kiersten White's Padawan. As always with our reviews here at Youtini, this one will be relatively spoiler free, so unless you're looking to go in completely cold turkey, you're safe to watch this review and see if this book is right for you. With that said, let's jump into the plot. Padawan begins with a journey. A fed-up, frustrated Obi-Wan Kenobi is questioning his place in the Order and, as a Padawan, to Qui-Gon Jinn. He's mastered so many techniques but can't seem to nail down the art of meditation. So to ponder all of this, Obi-Wan goes exploring. And when he explores, he finds remnants of a long-lost generation of Jedi, a message that leads him to the planet Lunara. Lunara is an unexplored world with a wealth of new wildlife, a ragtag bunch of survivors on the planet, and a mysterious power that coats the whole planet. In classic young adult fashion, the plot of this book mostly focuses on Obi-Wan's internal evolution as a character. The actual plot of the book is kind of secondary to that evolution as he learns about himself and grows. But that's not to say that there's not a lot of action along the way. There's plenty of fast-paced action, mystery, and wit to keep you turning the pages and keep the plot really entertaining even as it takes a backseat to Obi-Wan's character development. Now, are there some plot points that are a little bit too convenient? Sure. Is the plot kind of made to tell the story of Obi-Wan's character evolution? Yes. But for those of us readers who kind of see ourselves in Obi-Wan's shoes as a Padawan, who see the younger versions of ourselves in similar struggles to what Obi-Wan is going through, if a few tidy coincidences are needed to tell that story, then such is the will of the Force. So ultimately, we give the plot of Padawan a good. Now let's jump into the characters. Now, from the title of this book to Obi-Wan's piercing stare on the front of the cover, you know what is going to take up the majority of the character focus of this book. And of course, that's a younger Obi-Wan. But what's really interesting here is we get to see a very different character from Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, from the Disney Plus series, from the films. We see in Obi-Wan that's actually much more reminiscent of the Jedi Apprentice series from Legends. Fans of the series will appreciate the references and may see kind of a kindred spirit with the Obi-Wan in this book, as it's not about his poise, his grace, his knowledge, but instead about his struggle, his uncertainty, his growing pains. By the end of the book, it's not like all of Obi-Wan's questions about his place in the Jedi Order are answered, but he's on a trajectory to become the Jedi Master that we know him to be. Aside from Obi-Wan, the book is full of a supporting cast of characters that act as conduits for Obi-Wan's growth and personal development, although they don't quite reach the heights of being exceedingly memorable. Nonetheless though, every scene with the full crew is absolutely enjoyable, so it doesn't take away from the fun of this book at all. There's some additional cameos that we promise not to spoil here, but for fans of other Star Wars media, they'll absolutely make you gasp. So ultimately, we give the characters of this book a good rating. Now let's jump into the originality. So we've said this before with other books, but it is really difficult to tell an original story within the Star Wars universe, especially when that's about a character we already know. And that just goes even farther when it's about such a monumental character as Obi-Wan Kenobi. And early on, we're kind of lulled into a sense of familiarity as we see similar themes to Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray, for example, as we see Obi-Wan's life in the temple. But that rug is quickly pulled out from under us as Obi-Wan embarks on his solo journey. Without spoiling too much, Lenara is a very connected planet. The animals, plants, the whole ecosystem works together in a sort of harmony, and anything that threatens that harmony quickly learns the error of its ways. Meanwhile, the surviving tribe on the planet is kind of a mix of Lost Boys and Lord of the Flies. It's this ragtag group of survivors fighting for their lives on a daily basis but unwilling to give up their home. It's definitely a unique challenge for Obi-Wan. And while we'll never tire of visiting planets like Coruscant or Corellia, books like this just go to show us that the galaxy is so much bigger than we think. So that's why we give the originality of this book an incredible. Now let's jump into the writing. So the last few years have really increased the reach of the young adult market in Star Wars. And when we read books like Padawan, if you're kind of on the older side for these books, you can't help but wish that you were in the target audience when these books were released. White's writing doesn't take itself too seriously when it doesn't need to, and though there are plenty of striking visual descriptions, it doesn't get too bogged down in the minuscule details. Some older readers might feel a little bit force-fed by the kind of moralistic conclusions of the book, which is why we say that we wish we were this age when we got there. We wish we were going through the same things Obi-Wan was going through, so we could learn these lessons right alongside him. Nonetheless, White's writing of Obi-Wan captures exactly the spirit that this book was meant to capture for the perfect audience. So even if you're on the older side, you can definitely jump in and learn something from Obi-Wan as a Padawan. As one of our favorite Jedi says, truly wonderful the mind of a child is. That's why we give the writing of this book a good. Now let's jump into the entertainment. 2022 has been an incredible year so far for Star Wars, but we have to admit that a lot of the recent material has been kind of leaning towards the heavier side. We've experienced the depths of darkness, the dark side of the Force, the betrayal of brotherhood, so many heavy topics. And through all of that, Padawan comes as a breath of fresh air. The whole book radiates fun and enthusiasm, but that definitely ramps up as we get towards the end of the book. And in the climax is really when the action ramps up and you kind of fly through the final pages as you wait to find out what happened on this crazy, fast-paced adventure. And there's definitely something to be said about starting with scenes in the Jedi Temple, but the familiarity that kind of envelops us as we see Obi-Wan in those scenes before he's thrust off into the unknown. So while the highs and lows might not be quite as cinematic as some of the books we've experienced recently, this is a fun and really entertaining adventure and a refreshing change of pace. That's why we give the entertainment of this book a good. Kiersten White's first full-length Star Wars novel lets us see the galaxy through the eyes of one of our favorite characters in his most formative years. 2022 has been the year of Obi-Wan, there's no denying that, but White still manages to differentiate from all the stories we've heard, throwing back to the Legends Jedi Apprentice series in a way, giving a lighthearted story that really sheds light on some of the adolescent troubles of Obi-Wan, the struggles he went through to find his place in the Jedi Order. So the story is definitely more tailored to readers who are of Obi-Wan's own age, but it's a fantastic read for anyone who's a fan of Obi-Wan or just wants to jump into a more lighthearted story. Ultimately, we rated this book a good. Padawan is now available wherever books are sold, so check out the link in the description to pick up your copy now, or head on over to Audible to pick up the audio version narrated by Gary Furlong. And if you haven't dove into the world of Star Wars audiobooks before, stick around for this. Youtini has partnered with Audible to deliver your first Star Wars audiobook completely free. All you have to do is head on over to youtini.com/audible, sign up using that link, and your first Star Wars audiobook will be completely free. Padawan is the perfect opportunity to take that step into this bigger world. Thanks for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.